what's happening in Greece is that, the Greeks signed an agreement with the European Union a couple of years ago. Now, this agreement includes some very tough austerity measures, and the Greek people decided that they had enough with the austerity and they want to renegotiate the agreement that they have with the European Union. Now, the European Union is afraid that if they renegotiate the agreement with Greece, Spain and Portugal are next in line, and Spain is a much larger economy. So in order to stop this process of renegotiation with the failing economies of Europe, they decided to be very tough with the Greek and not agree for serious concessions with regard to the previous agreement that they had with the Greek government. Well, the Greek economy is a rather small economy. I mean, it's smaller than the Israeli economy, for instance. But the problem is that this crisis could start a chain reaction since the developed economies are relatively weak now. The growth rate is very, very small in Europe, if at all, and quite small in the United States also. So even relatively small crisis like the Greek crisis could cause some chain reaction that would lead to a major global crisis, and that's the fear. If it does turn into a global crisis, then anything could happen. So we could get the same kind of a recession that we had at the end of 2008 and the beginning of 2009. Now, luckily for us in Israel, we are now in a relatively good shape. The economy is still growing. The budget deficit is relatively small. Our debt ratio, debt to GDP, is also relatively small. So we are getting into this in a relatively good shape. Well, there is a big problem in Greece. The economy shrank by something like 15 to 20%, but still they carry a very heavy burden of debt, which they accumulated over several decades. Now, the European Union decided to cancel some of the debt, but they are still not on the highway. They would still have to suffer several more years of austerity before they start growing and getting out of this crisis. So whatever happens, for the Greek people, I guess the coming years are not going to be much easier than the previous 4 or 5 years. No one knows how this crisis will end, because it really depends whether this is going to start a snowball that would lead to a global crisis, or is it going to be, or is it going to remain isolated to Greece and its financial partners? If the latter happens, then it will end fairly quickly. But if it will get us into a global crisis, it will be tough and quite long.
I believe we have a lot of people that are very concerned for this situation. What's the message that you tell them?
Well, they are right to be concerned, because there is danger. It's not an imminent danger, but there is danger. What I could tell them is that the Israeli economy is getting into this crisis in a fairly good shape. We have a relatively small budget deficit, a small burden of debt relative to GDP. So I'm optimistic that even in the worst case scenario, we'll get out of it relatively easy.
Professor Avi Simhon from Hebrew University, thank you very much to join us.
Thank you.